Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Digital Transformation and Government Conference. It's going to be held for the next 3 days, virtually, but hosted in Ottawa. So welcome, bienvenue, bienvenidos, Satyatun, and we've got folks from all over the world they're going to be in attendance. My name is Bob Wiseman. I'm sort of the chair of the conference. I'm at University of Ottawa, and I'm also president of ISACA Ottawa Valley and president of Association of Enterprise Architects, the Ottawa Gatineau chapter, as well as professor in digital transformation and innovation. I say professional maven is because what I try to do is bring groups together. As you can see, ISACA is hosting a conference, but alongside in partnership with many other organizations, notably the Association of Enterprise Architects, KIPS, the University of Ottawa Digital Transformation Innovation Program, DAMA, the Data Management Association, the International Institute of Business Analysis, and last but certainly not least, One in Tech, which is an initiative to get more women into the technology field. What I'd like to do is clarify before we charge off some key terms to make sure we understand where we're coming from. Digitization, what we're doing when we use that term, we're replacing what we do manually with technology. So we're throwing technology at the problem, we're leaving the business processes and everything in place. Digitalization is where you focus on narrow process improvement along with technology. That's more at the project level, at the single service level. Digital transformation, it's a client-focused enterprise transformation in service delivery that you're envisaging. It's changing the way you do business, new business models and the like. This conference is focused on digital transformation. I know in Canada we've gone through digitization and digitalization. Now we're coping with the challenges of digital transformation, which is at the portfolio much higher level within the enterprise. For that, these definitions, by the way, I was speaking to UN conference and they had they're using that globally now as a series of definitions for that. Now, digital transformation in government, we're trying to focus, when you're dealing in government, it's selfless service to others, it's not profit driven, it's limited emphasis on research and development. You're not looking at creating the latest and greatest, you're interested in service to others. So it really makes a difference. Also, the fact is that government is extremely complex. You're dealing across all industry domains, it's multi-jurisdictional, and failure rates are high. I know at the university when we were teaching it, I was kind of surprised how high they were. But some of the stats in IT and government, it's up to 94% failure rate, depending on which country you're dealing with. And software in general overall has got a 60% plus failure rate. Uh, these are issues, and you can't do digital transformation if you can't trust your digitization platform. Okay, for that. There is a need to try and get this right. Okay, for that. Now, some of the keys to it within the enterprise are going to be continuous learning, sharing and maintaining best practices, creating and maintaining standards. There's also innovation and applied research that we can basically get it right. And we find is that some of the areas, and this conference brings together academia, professional associations, and certifications, and government. Uh, they can provide part of the solution to this perennial and very complex or wicked problem that we have with respect to digital transformation in government. It's not going to be any one area in isolation that's going to provide the key or assistance in this particular area. And that's one reason we're having this conference is to bring the players together and the people can listen to one another and get out of their professional silos. Okay, and like I said, collaborate to create the digital transformation that we're looking for to improve our citizens, service to citizens as well as to the other clients of government. So the conference aim is to bring everybody together. We want to capture experiences, make them available. The presentations, both the recordings and the presentations will be new digitized open educational resources that'll be indexed at the University of Ottawa in the Open Systems Journal and proceedings. And what we'll do is we'll make them available to anywhere in the world. The main thing is this makes them discoverable. so we don't have to keep learning the same lesson time and time again, okay, over time. We want to take a look at leadership innovation. We want to look at new government business models. Canada is a good example. You know, our multi-jurisdictional service delivery was based on an 1867 timeframe. Technology has changed since then. We have to take a look not only at the digitization and the technology and the business process improvement. We have to take a look at potentially new legislation and policy. This is hard. But we have to start looking at that as to what's best. And also management innovation is when we have a business model, we want to optimize the use of technology. We want to put in place the governance and then the analysis and architecture so we can make informed decisions of where we want to move forward. So these are sort of the themes of the conference, the high level themes, and some of the issues we have to address in digital transformation um, and innovation within government context. Day one, we have an excellent presentation from privacy, digital transformation in the European Union, and also the US states. In Canada, we're going to be getting the Shared Services Canada, the Architecture Center of Excellence. It's going to be presenting as well as benefits, um, delivery modernization. Sorry, that's a typo. And then CIOs in the fourth industrial revolution and maturing departmental transformation will bring it together. The CIOs, that's going to be Philip Johnson putting that together from the CIO Association of Canada. He's also CIO over at NRC. And maturing departmental transformation, that's going to be bringing together, that's going to be the experiences from Raj. Raj Tapal, who's going to be sharing them from Transport Canada, a fairly mature department. Uh, Day two, we're going to be talking about the European Union e-government reference architecture. Defense Data Foundation by Stephen Burt, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Data, Innovation, and Analytics. And also we'll be talking about digital transformation through data transformation from the Chief Data Officer from ESDC, that's Ema Coney, that's going to be presenting. We'll talk about success factors for successful enterprise architecture implementation. Enterprise architecture was a tool that was created to allow a digital transformation in government. Dr. Tim Lethbridge is going to be presenting that from University of Ottawa. And then we're talking about professional training and education by Professor Liam Payton, who's also Vice Dean, and he's head of the Digital Transformation and Innovation Program, which is fairly new at the University of Ottawa. Then we'll be talking about modernizing government procurement by Joanna Murphy from the Office of the Auditor General. And then Canadian Cybersecurity and Cyber Audit Framework, Robert Fox, Heather Belanger, and then Larry Stoddard and Brian Thompson are going to be presenting the new cyber audit framework, which is something too with respect to privacy as we have to take a look at as well. On day three, we're very privileged to have folks from the National Institute of Smart Government in India, and they'll talk about India's digital transformation that's happening ongoing. Their problems are mind-boggling. They're also will be talking about transforming a high security organization. Rachel Porteous from FinTrack will be talking about that. And then the collaborative thwarting of cyber attacks to the Canadian Center for Threat Exchange. And Robert Gordon will be talking to that organization and the strides they've made over the last 5 years. Then again, Raul Abril will be talking about implementing digital public services in the European Union. And then Greg Richards will be talking about analytics-based results management, uh, which for implementation. We've got a very interesting presentation on human-centric design by Anwarjit Kaur. And then we got business-driven enterprise architecture by Christian Sauvé from the Public Service Commission. And then we'll be talking, Vic Pant will be talking about the science and policy integration in digital accelerators and technology readiness assessments that they have within Natural Resources Canada. This rounds out the agenda. I think it's going to be a great one. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you right now Greg Smolynec. He's the Deputy Commissioner, Policy Promotion Sector in the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. Uh, the promotion program is future looking, and what the aim is to inform Canadians of their rights, how to exercise them, and to bring organizations towards compliance with the law. His staff develops practical information and guidance and provides advice on specific initiatives. Prior to OPC, Greg served as the Director General Strategic Initiatives at National Defence Headquarters, leading the strategic outlook function for the Canadian Armed Forces. This identified and assessed all manners of factors to support strategic decision-making and advice to government. He has a BA and MA in history from McGill University and MA Russian and East European Studies from Carleton, and a doctorate in history from Duke University. So without further ado, I turn over to Gregory and his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to join you today for the second annual conference on digital transformation in government. I'd like to thank you, Bob Wiseman of the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, and other conference organizers for inviting me to speak today about privacy. I'm Gregory Smolynec. For the last 3 years, I've had the privilege of leading the policy and promotion sector of the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, and the phenomenal people on the teams that comprise the sector. That is the policy group, the communications branch, a technology analysis team, and 2 directorates devoted to engaging and advising both the public and private sectors. Among the many things that I love about my job is that I'm a witness and a participant to history in the making. Almost on a daily basis, we know that there are stories, news stories about privacy. There are a lot of breaches, there are a lot of scandals, there's lots of new technology. And we can see with our own eyes how technology, business, government, indeed so many aspects of our lives are changing. This is exciting, and it's also profoundly significant for us as individuals, as citizens, for our societies, our communities, our countries, indeed for the whole world. Because of these changes, we find ourselves at a transitional stage in history. Today, I'll speak about some developments in privacy. I'll approach the subject on 2 levels. One, a little bit reflective with a few thoughts on history, can't help myself. And the other, maybe a little bit more practical, giving you a few concrete things to consider and to incorporate in your day-to-day work. I'll also share with you some recent updates from our office, along with some of our current priorities. It has been an incredibly busy year for the world of privacy in Canada and in other places. Here in our country, the federal government has undertaken a number of legislative reform initiatives with the goal of modernizing Canada's privacy legislation. My office has submitted numerous responses to these initiatives. We have published submissions and recommendations related to the Access to Information Act, the Privacy Act, which governs our public sector, and Canada's new proposed private sector privacy legislation. We've also published the results of a consultation we conducted on artificial intelligence and privacy. And currently, we're going to be consulting on how facial recognition technologies should be regulated following the results of 2 investigations, one into the facial recognition technology firm ClearView AI, a company that scraped billions of images of people from across the internet, and a related investigation into the Royal Canadian Mounted Police's use of ClearView AI. We've also been faced with new questions surrounding privacy. This is in part due to the digitization, accelerating digitization, and now digital transformation that seems to have been accelerated during the pandemic and as a result of the pandemic. Of course, as we're doing right now, instead of meeting in person, we've transitioned to working, socializing, going to school, and seeing the doctor remotely through video conferencing services and through online platforms. We've seen in the federal government use of data in new ways while responding to COVID-19. And in a significant initiative, just as one example of many, the federal government even developed an exposure notification app. It goes without saying that so many technologies bring great convenience, great efficiencies, and benefits into our lives. So do many digitized services. At the same time, those services and those technologies that involve personal information, in many cases, are raising new privacy risks. Take, for example, telemedicine. Telemedicine creates risk to doctor-patient confidentiality when virtual platforms involve commercial enterprises. E-learning platforms can capture, for instance, sensitive information about students' learning disabilities and other behavioral issues. Unlocking the value of data for the benefit of Canadians or others is obviously a worthy objective. That said, we need to make sure that modern privacy laws unlock the value of data and improve service delivery in ways that maintain and uphold fundamental rights. And privacy is one of these fundamental rights. Not only is privacy an internationally recognized human right, it's recognized as a human right, by the way, in the UN Declaration of Human Rights in Article 12, but privacy is also instrumental to human liberty and freedom. It's a necessary precondition for other rights and freedoms. It's what enables us to live and develop independently, away from the watchful eye of, for instance, a surveillance state or corporate, commercial surveillance practices. And allows us to participate voluntarily and freely and actively in the regular day-to-day activities of democratic society. When it comes to government services, and the functioning of our democracy, where we are, after all, not merely customers of the government or clients, we're citizens with rights that go far beyond those of customers or clients. Now, there are many exciting, innovative, technologically enabled activities governments can undertake and are undertaking. But it's important to carefully consider them and the implications of these tools for ourselves as individuals, as citizens, and for our countries as democracies. And we have to be cognizant of the evolving threat environment in which our digital lives are lived. With new powerful tools, such as facial recognition technologies and various applications of artificial intelligence, we also need to ensure that our laws are there to protect us. If we're not careful, we risk enabling widespread surveillance, perhaps even ubiquitous and persistent surveillance. We can also enable biased decision-making, or we could create environments in which privacy is eroded with a corresponding erosion in other rights and freedoms. It is, in my opinion, not at all an exaggeration to say that we are currently witnessing developments that amount to an unfolding history in which communications, in the digitized communications technologies, are central to what I refer to as epochal societal change and to changes in the place of the individual in society. Our challenge as we go about our work is to understand what all these developments mean, to describe them in sufficient detail, and to consider their implications so we have an understanding of the broader picture that emerges. So what are we dealing with here? I find it helpful sometimes to consider the work of the great Canadian communications theorist, Marshall McLuhan. And he provides some insight, I think, into the changes we're witnessing. He held that new technologies exert a gravitational effect on cognition, which in turn affects social organization. In McLuhan's analysis, for instance, print technology changed human perceptual habits and social interactions, making possible the most salient trends of the modern period, including developments such as individualism, democracy, Protestantism in the realm of religion, capitalism, and nationalism. We should consider what effects then have digital communications technologies had for us more recently. What effects will they have? What has the internet? What have smartphones, and let's say more recently, various apps, what have they brought? What changes are they bringing to humankind? What does digitization mean for democracy? Now, we benefit by gaining a broader perspective, by understanding, as McLuhan would have it, the characteristics of the medium or the media and how they affect the individual and society. Now, I don't have all the answers to these questions, but there is a helpful lens through which to ask important questions and to view some of these changes. It's important to remember that the choices we make about digitization and digital transformation and how we handle data will have long-term impacts for all citizens, including the right to privacy and for our other rights and values. One of McLuhan's key questions that helped understand these developments was What does a new electronic medium or technology render obsolete? Applying this question to a contemporary example, for instance, we might ask, what is a new app? And just to take one, for example, let's say a COVID exposure notification app. What does that render obsolete? How does it change the relationship between citizens and governments? These kind of questions. I'll let you consider that for yourselves, but I'll go on to some other material. As governments seek to respond to Canadians' requests for open government and more convenience in service delivery, it's important that government does so in a way that respects privacy rights of Canadians, and ultimately in ways that respect and sustain our democracy. As organizations strive to attain all the benefits of a data-driven society, it's important to remember that a great deal of data that is produced by modern technologies or collected by modern technologies is about real people. It can reveal things about our behaviors, predict things about our behaviors and habits, and can be intimately linked to other information and define us as individuals. As with the private sector, government is seeking to unlock the benefits of data. It's understandable. There's a sense that governments are seeking to catch up as well to the private sector and media, to be more agile, more open, more user-focused. However, in this context, government also needs to be mindful that it also has responsibility to protect the vast amounts of personal information in its possession. Both governments and commercial enterprises in Canada and other jurisdictions around the world are legally bound to protect personal information, to protect privacy. Digital and open government initiatives will require trust that privacy is not unduly infringed, or that individual personal information will not be inadvertently disclosed or put at unacceptable risk. When the pandemic hit, we were approached by many federal government organizations to provide advice on how to use the rich data that they hold for innovative purposes, in addition to plans to collect new personal information. We developed a framework for privacy impactful government initiatives to help guide organizations in new situations and to address trends heightened by the pandemic. The framework provided a flexible approach in the context of the pandemic, while at the same time making available an important analytical tool that reflects well-established privacy principles. That's extremely important in an age when technology has become both intimate and omnipresent. By that, I mean that technologies have become highly personal and personalized. Our health information, for instance, is collected by smartwatches. Experts are now talking of smartphones as a new home where we carry around with us wherever we go. And there's a proliferation of technologies and new ways of conducting businesses. Take, for example, video interviewing technologies, some of which even offer emotion detection technologies built in. Video recording interviews means there's a new way and new ways of collecting of sensitive personal information. And often this involves outsourcing to third parties. So high-risk activities and technologies are being developed all the time. Now, such technologies can collect vast amounts of data, and obviously this data can be processed, interpreted, aggregated, stored, shared with others, and used in ways sometimes we can't anticipate. It's especially true in the area of artificial intelligence. When combined with other data sources, seemingly innocuous information can reveal a great deal. Over the last year, we've seen so many changes and so much has become possible. But in the midst of all this change, we have to remember that, so far, the laws, in Canada at least, have not changed. While embarking on a new initiative, a pilot or a new program or an integration of data that involves personal information, federal institutions in Canada are required to develop and submit privacy impact assessments to the OPC. These shouldn't be considered as barriers or burdens. And for your information, my office has provided a guide to the privacy impact assessment process. It's available online on our website. It's step-by-step guidance on how to complete privacy impact assessments. But privacy impact assessments don't only help you in terms of privacy. They'll help you focus your initiatives. They'll make you consider what's necessary, what's superfluous. They'll streamline your initiatives. As a result, it'll probably lead to better outcomes for various programs and new initiatives, and not just from a privacy perspective. So we strongly encourage departments to connect with their access to information and privacy teams in Canada prior to proceeding with new initiatives that will impact privacy, and, as required by government policy, to write privacy impact assessments. On the private sector side, too, we strongly encourage businesses to build privacy in at the beginning, to design with privacy in mind. You could use privacy impact assessments on the private sector side as well. This too will help focus your products, your integration, your initiatives. And it has the obvious benefit as well, both on public and private sector side, of mitigating regulatory risk. Departments and agencies generate and hold a vast and diverse and ever-expanding array of data. And this includes sensitive personal information. The Government of Canada's Digital Operations Strategic Plan aims to shift towards the use of technology and digital platforms to improve how Canadians access government services, how the platforms they use can access those services, and how the federal government can deliver services to Canadians. The strategy quotes a number of change drivers, societal and technological changes that have led the federal government to develop and move towards a digital government model. These include aging IT and aging infrastructure needs, rapid technological change, digital skills development, and the rise of things such as the Internet of Things. It cites public expectations to receive information instantly from devices. The digital age has ushered in a phenomenal rate of growth in data. But effectively managing that growing volume of data is, of course, a challenge for both public sector organizations and private sector firms. It's imperative that government limit its collection of information to that which is necessary for a specific objective. That is a fundamental privacy principle. Once information is collected, institutions must ensure proper procedures are in place and measures have been implemented so that the information is adequately safeguarded. And safeguarding is, of course, another important privacy principle. Our outdated privacy laws add to the challenge in many ways. With regards to the Privacy Act, the public sector law in Canada, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada published recommendations earlier this year in response to Justice Canada's consultation on modernizing the law. We welcome many aspects of the proposal, which included a key objective to protect, quote, individuals' human dignity, personal autonomy, and self-determination. And thereby, this consultation document recognizes the broad scope of the right of privacy as a human right. It also includes an expanded definition of personal information, explicit requirements for the protection of information, and mandatory breach reporting to affected individuals and the Privacy Commissioner. Our office also further suggested clarifying what is called the, quote, reasonably required standard, which limits the collection of personal information to a federal body, to clearly affirm that privacy impacts must be proportionate to the public interests at stake. We also ask for provisions on automated decision-making, such as requiring institutions to log and trace personal information used in automated decision-making, as well as clarifying that the concept of publicly available personal information does not apply to information where an individual has a reasonable expectation of privacy. I'm hopeful that an updated Privacy Act will not only better protect Canadians' privacy rights, but it will also be simpler and clearer for government organizations to follow as well. I'd like to discuss a theme we've recently been seeing regarding government working with businesses on specific projects or to combine their data for a common goal. In our office's last annual report, we described our investigation into Statistics Canada's use of detailed financial information about hundreds of thousands of Canadians, which the federal agency had acquired or was planning to acquire from private sector organizations, financial institutions, in the context of two projects, namely the Credit Information Project and the Financial Transactions Project. We found that the projects as originally designed did not take into account the necessity and proportionality principles. Our investigation also raised the importance of ensuring that Canadians are protected through, at a minimum, common privacy principles included in laws that govern both government and the private sector. What we're seeing is the growth of public-private partnerships, and as a result, there are greater overlaps in the use of data and in the laws, the private and public sector laws in Canada. Our investigation served as an example of how the pursuit of laudable public interest goals can lead to highly privacy invasive results when privacy is not taken into consideration early on in the development of initiatives. Now more than ever, Canadians need legal assurance that their privacy rights are protected, and this includes in the area of public-private partnerships or public reliance on private infrastructure and technologies. We're also calling for a harmonization of our public and private sector laws. I'd also like to highlight another issue, and that is related to breaches. Of course, databases can be a goldmine for thieves or hostile states who may wish to access the information held in various databases, large databases, for malicious or nefarious purposes. In the 2019-2020, we received just 341 breach reports in the public sector, in comparison to about 155 such reports a year earlier. Our view is that there is systemic underreporting of breaches. In our view, well, first of all, there is an obligation for both public and private sector organizations to report breaches. Under the Public Sector Privacy Act, that obligation resides in Treasury Board policy, which requires that our officials be notified of material privacy breaches. A material breach, by the way, is one that involves either sensitive information that can be reasonably expected to cause harm, or involves the personal information of a large number of individuals. On the private sector side, our private sector law requires organizations to report breaches of security safeguards involving personal information that pose a real risk of significant harm to individuals. Organizations must notify affected individuals about those breaches and keep records of all those breaches. And we've noted some significant differences in breach reports provided to our office by private versus public sector organizations. We note with some concern that very few privacy breach reports we receive from federal institutions mention cyber attacks. It's not because we don't think it's happening. We're aware of the frequency of cyber attacks, but for some reason, public institutions aren't always reporting cyber attacks as breaches. So given that cyber incidents often may involve risks for privacy, I just want to reiterate the need to report privacy breaches involving cyber attacks to our office. As cyber attacks increase in number and sophistication, we should also consider how we protect those networks, government data holdings, and critical infrastructure. In days of old, the mishandling of a paper file may have involved the violation of a small number of people's personal information. Today, we are indeed witnessing breaches involving millions of people's data. In fact, tens of millions of people's data. I can name breaches involving hundreds of millions of people's data, or even billions of people's data. It's remarkable. When we have such large-scale breaches happen, and sometimes they may be perpetrated by state actors, we need to consider how we safeguard this information and how we can make our networks and our infrastructure more resilient. Because at some point in time, it becomes not only a matter of privacy for individuals, which is critically important, of course, but also becomes a national security problem as well. You could think of different examples from the recent past. There was a case of a breach, hack of the World Anti-Doping Association that's headquartered in Montreal. A phishing attack in 2016 led to a breach of personal sensitive information. Ultimately, that breach was attributed to Russian military intelligence, and the personal information of many athletes, sensitive information, was released into the public domain. You have other instances such as the famous or infamous Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal, which is suggestive of how various actors and personal information may be used or misused in the context of electoral processes. Large collections of data may also present heightened surveillance risk. As I mentioned at the outset, the OPC investigated ClearView AI, the facial recognition technology company, and a tool that it provided to law enforcement agencies and commercial organizations to match photographs of unknown people against a massive data bank of 3 billion images scraped from the internet. Now, the vast majority of the people whose images were scraped never have been nor ever will be implicated in any crime. Our investigation found that this represented mass surveillance and was a clear violation of the privacy rights of Canadians. It created the risk of significant harm to individuals. It raised, for example, risks of misidentification and exposure to potential data breaches. We also found that ClearView collected the images of Canadians and actively marketed services to law enforcement agencies across the country. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police became a customer, and a total of 48 accounts were created by the Mounties and other organizations across the country. Now, we released our investigation of the RCMP's use of ClearView just last week. In it, we found, that, among other things, that the RCMP's use of ClearView itself was not compliant with the law. And we found that federal institutions are obligated to ensure that any tools and databases supplied by private sector vendors are themselves compliant with the law. So let me conclude with a few thoughts. The basic question I think that we need to ask ourselves is this, and that is, what kind of society do we want to live in? Is it one where government and businesses are in a race to innovate, no matter what the cost? Or is it one where Canadians or citizens are put first, where privacy and personal information of citizens is appropriately safeguarded? I certainly hope that we're not building a country where privacy is given short shrift. It's not too long ago that the phrase "move fast and break things" emanated from the lips of Mark Zuckerberg and a few of his acolytes. It may have even been repeated by Canadian government officials. But that, of course, was before Cambridge Analytica and so many other privacy breaches and scandals. When it comes to democratic governance, when it comes to democracy, I strongly advise that we move carefully and thoughtfully, and that we don't break democracy. Privacy and innovation aren't opposing values. We can absolutely protect privacy while encouraging innovation. It's really a question of design, of the products themselves and the laws that govern their use. In fact, in both the public and private sectors, privacy by design and a host of privacy-enhancing technologies are in effect attributes of competitive advantage and a mark of resilient systems and societies. To build trust and confidence, to make privacy a priority, you need to think of it as a priority in your organizations by building it in from the start. Enterprise architects can help make this happen. As enterprise architects, you have a holistic understanding of your business, the technology, practices, standards, and data flows within the organization. In short, you see the big picture, and you're therefore in a unique position to help your organizations become more resilient against privacy breaches and privacy complaints. You're in a perfect position to work with other members of your organization to better understand the broader data protection and privacy implications while drawing attention to potential privacy risks. Have those conversations early on and before technologies and processes are implemented. Validate that you can use the information, that's properly secured, and that you can comply with all aspects of the law in your jurisdictions. Conduct privacy impact assessments. Use the guides available to help you do so. When recommending incorporating new technology in the organization's architecture, factor in the degree to which this may affect data protection and privacy. And ask yourselves, what information is required for this technology to work? Is the purpose of its utilization acceptable to our citizens or to our customers? By taking a privacy first or a privacy by design approach, you'll not only become a more valued part of your organization, but your customers, clients, and citizens will also benefit. Our office has government and business advisory teams that are at your disposal to help provide you with information on how to achieve compliance. They can do so either in a formal or an informal capacity, and they can help you ensure that you build in privacy from the beginning so it does not become a compliance issue later on. The past few years have highlighted the importance of benefits and the worrying risks that new technologies pose to our values and to our rights. This has become ever more evident since the start of the pandemic. The issues we face are complex, but in my view, the path forward is fairly clear. As a society, we need to project our values into our laws that regulate the digital space and into our programs and services to Canadians and other citizens around the world. Our citizens expect nothing less from their public institutions. And it is on this condition that confidence in the digital economy and in digital government, which has been damaged lately by numerous scandals, will be restored. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take your questions.
Do we have any questions? Well, thank you very much, Gregory, for that insightful presentation. It was much appreciated. I know that's one thing. You mentioned the enterprise architecture, you mentioned the governance, you mentioned the requirement for a solid information architecture. You can't, it's not just one individual that does it, it's a collaborative approach that's going to achieve results. And also we have to educate people as to exactly what the expectations are. Okay, for that.
Bob, by the
Yes?
way, just by coincidence, our guide to the PIA process is titled Expectations.
Yes.
So you're quite right.
Well, we'll make that link available to participants.
Great.
And like I said, I just went through while you were talking. I went through the website, and I was looking while you were speaking, and it provides the guidance that's required. And hopefully, we can maybe call upon your assistance in organizations such as the Open Group, where we're trying to grapple with how do we make privacy real to engineers and the people that are actually building the systems at this point in time, and also doing the enterprise architecture. Jean-Luc, do you have any?
Yes, so
Okay.
we do have one question for Greg here. The question is, with the pace of technology change and adaptation, especially experienced with COVID, how can the policy development keep pace?
Well, in fact, that's a question that preoccupies me quite frequently. And it's exactly in those terms that I think of it. I do wonder about whether or not we are pacing the various changes. In our office, we do have a technology analysis laboratory. It's small. We have a small team of technology analysts. We test various new technologies. We try and understand them. We partner with some other groups to conduct some research as well. And they too develop guidance. For instance, they're in the process of developing guidance on de-identification of data. And we are looking into questions such as the use of synthetic data as a privacy enhancing technology itself. But it is difficult because of that very pace of technology. There's obviously new apps all the time. Apps are developed, and sometimes they aren't fully researched and investigated before they're made available at the App Store, for instance. And there are many questions and many risks involved. I think one of the things that we need to do that would help mitigate the risk of technological change outpacing regulation is to develop laws that are rights-based and values-based. I think this would help to make them endure longer in the face of technological change. The other thing, of course, is sometimes it may be necessary to, like our law in Canada is technology neutral. But there are cases, for instance, about facial recognition technology. Right now, we're concerned, do we need to have special legislation that addresses facial recognition technology in particular because of its particularities? So the question is, how do you also regulate and legislate in a way that endures over time? I think one way to do so is to make sure that the values and rights basis is built in there, and that understanding of this problem space is communicated and people are aware of it. And of course, more research in this area. I might note one thing in parting. If you look at the activities in the domain of privacy enhancing technologies by large big tech firms, look at Microsoft, look at Apple, even Google lately. These firms are looking at their privacy lines of business and looking for competitive advantage in this space as well. So they're not dismissing it. I think they're building it in. So I would suggest that they're doing this for good reasons, in their case, commercial reasons. So it helps that on all sides, public and private sector sides, that people consider this, because I think it matters to citizens and to consumers. So that will help pace the change, I think.
Any other questions, Jean-Luc, that came from the crowd?
Yes, there's a couple of questions. I'll not to pick favorites, I'll just pick one at random. So here we have one that says, given the importance of privacy by design in protecting our personal information as citizens, how inhibiting and time-consuming can privacy by design be given the fast-pacing nature of digitization nowadays?
Right. It's a real concern, I suppose, whether you're talking public or private sector. By the way, one thing I noticed when I came in to this job was there were popular conceptions of privacy as a barrier. There are quite a few people, both in the private sector and in the public sector, who think that privacy is a barrier to innovation. Privacy is a barrier to economic growth. Privacy is a barrier to digitizing government or digital transformation. It was kind of conspicuous when I came in, because I thought, oh, there's a really strongly held views in this area. Now, you'd expect me to say that I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case. And I think that you will find that, first of all, there's a real risk by ignoring privacy, right? So if you're not considering privacy upfront, upstream in the development of something, you do run, quite bluntly, regulatory risk. You may have a problem, you may have a complaint, and you may find yourself non-compliant with the law. In many jurisdictions around the world, you can be heavily fined for that. So there's a concrete way to evaluate your risk. In the not too distant future in Canada, that may be the case here too, if the law is reformed with administrative monetary penalties built into the law. But as I was saying, it's not that complicated. We do have, and we and other data protection authorities around the world have guides on how to, conduct privacy impact assessments, itself a form of privacy by design. What you need to do, how to build privacy enhancing technologies. And as I say, not only does this often help you mitigate your regulatory risk, as it should, but it may actually improve whatever it is you're doing, because it'll make you ask some fundamental questions like, do I have the legal authority to do this? What am I trying to achieve? Is this data collection necessary for the purpose that I'm assuming we're going to use it for? So it'll actually streamline your initiatives. So I would say overall, I don't have any figures at hand right now to prove it, but both intuitively, and I suspect if you actually studied the numbers, I think it'd probably be economical and useful to do things like privacy impact assessments and build in privacy by design at the beginning. You also have, I expect, better customer trust in the case of commercial enterprises, or better citizen trust, and as a result, better uptake in the service as well. Any others?
Well, I think right now that those are some of the key questions that were basically posed, Gregory. I'm going to be posting some stuff afterwards. If you have anything you wish to share with the conference participants, just send it to me and I'll make sure it's posted to a board that the individuals can access. I want to thank you very much for your presentation. It's been very insightful, and I recommend that people take a look at the guidance, the privacy topics, privacy impact assessments, and the OPC site, as well as the Government of Ontario has been doing a lot of work in the privacy by design area. I think a lot of people grapple with the fact that a lot of the direction is qualitative rather than quantitative. And sometimes when you try to engineer it in at the beginning, you're not exactly sure whether you've actually reached the goals or the barriers with that. So that is some of the challenges. And if we can help make it clear quantitatively as to what the expectations are, I think we'd be going a long way to working well. So thank you very much for your presentation, Greg, and it was greatly appreciated. And I would say to all the audience right now, I think what happens is we'll just have a small pause, and then we'll have Pierre Cotte is going to present on the European Union digital transformation strategy. So thank you again very much, Greg. It was a very insightful discussion, and this presentation it has been recorded and will be made available to all conference attendees. Okay,
Thank you
thank you.
very much for having me. I appreciate it, and have a great conference, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much.